So let's take a look at the social emotional developmental domain that can be found in both the California Preschool Learning Foundations and the Preschool Curriculum Framework in Volume 1. So let's just review what the learning foundations and the curriculum frameworks are. The learning foundations are goal-like statements in key areas of learning, and they're organized in domains to guide planning. They describe the kind of learning and development we want to support through intentional curriculum planning. And then the curriculum framework provides the guidance in planning and implementing curriculum that supports children as they progress in their learning and development in each domain. And keep in mind that the curriculum framework does not tell us what to teach. It gives us guidelines in planning and implementing curriculum. So now let's look at one of the developmental domains that can be found in both the learning foundations and the curriculum framework, and that's the social emotional developmental domain. So children have different temperaments, personality, family background, language, culture, values, and prior experiences. And so these variants or differences affect how individual children may demonstrate the skills and behaviors described in the foundations and in the curriculum framework for social emotional development. So let's take a look for a minute at temperament. Temperament is the genetic, biologically determined behavior of a person across life. And so because this is genetic, it's not something that we grow out of. It's something that we maintain as part of the ways that we approach life. In a minute, we're going to talk about what our role as adults are in assisting and facilitating and supporting individuals in developing skills in relationship to this genetic biological aspect of our personality and behavior. And keep in mind that this is inherited from mother and father and of course previous family heritage. And so you may think about the people around you and what their temperament might be, and if you decide to create children with that person, it's something you might want to consider. So there are 3 different temperaments. There's easy temperament, slow to warm temperament, and difficult temperament. And let's look at some characteristics of these. When we look at infants and temperament, we would look at things like how often do they sleep? What do they do when they're stressed? Do they cry a lot? How is their sleeping patterns? Things like that. But those are the dimensions of temperament that we look at first. But there are aspects of temperament for all age groups. And remember, our temperament is consistent. And so easy temperament, the individuals with easy temperament, and by the way, fortunately, this is the largest number of us, easy temperament individuals adapt easily to change. They're usually positive and happy. They have mild reactions to sensory experiences. They have an age-appropriate attention span, and they're curious. Slow to warm temperament. These individuals have hesitant reactions to new situations and people, but they adjust with time and without pressure. They tend to be quiet and reserved, and they are curious with reassurance. And then there's the third temperament, which is difficult. A difficult temperament individual has trouble adjusting to new situations and people. Their mood is usually negative, very sensitive to sensory stimulus, can't focus on activities with distractions and prefers the familiar over the new. Okay, so 3 types: easy, slow to warm, and difficult. So then our role as adults in facilitating and supporting children's development is we want to make sure that we focus on assertiveness with the children. And assertiveness is standing up for yourself without infringing on the rights of others. This is not aggressive. Aggressive would be standing up for yourself at the expense of the rights of others. So all temperaments need to develop these skills. So the easy temperament, because they tend to be passive, we have to make sure that we facilitate and support them in standing up for themselves so that they are not taken advantage of. And for difficult and slow to warm, they sometimes can be aggressive, and so with those 2 temperaments, we want to make sure that they, especially difficult, have no problem standing up for themselves, but it's often at the expense of others. Okay, so what we want to do is look at temperament, realize that it's something that's genetic and remains with the individual their lifespan, but they need to develop skills like assertiveness in order to interact with others in our social environment. The next thing we need to think about is play. Play is a central context for social and emotional development in early childhood. So it's really important that children have lots of opportunities to participate in child initiative play for long periods of time. Okay, so now let's look at this domain, and we're going to look at this is a map of the learning foundations, and we can look at the different parts of the domain. So the first thing we're going to look at the very top, you can see an arrow there indicating that this is the social emotional domain. The strand is social interaction. We're going to talk more about those strands in a few minutes. And the substrand is interacting with peers. And then we have 2 age groups there. We have a younger one and an older one at or around 48 months and at or around 60 months. Then we have a foundation there, or what we might expect for that child depending on that age. In regards to interacting with their peers, we have a description of that foundation, and then we have examples underneath. So just to review, we have the domain, social emotional. The strand is social interaction. The substrand is interactions with peers. We have 2 age groups. We have a description of the foundation. And then we have underneath there now, we have examples. These are just examples. This is not a checklist. So we're not looking exactly for these things under that foundation and age, but they're just examples of what we might see. And then at the very bottom of the page, these are some notes for if you have children you're working with disabilities. These are some notes in regards to that, in regards to this strand and substrand. So let's look at all of the strands and the substrands in the social emotional domain. So the first strand is self, and the substrands are listed below: self-awareness, self-regulation, social and emotional understanding, empathy and caring, and initiative and learning. So taking the initiative to explore and discover and then learn from that. So that's the first strand. The second strand is social interaction, and the substrands for that strand are interactions with familiar adults, interactions with peers, group participation, and cooperation and responsibility. And the third strand is relationships. And the substrands for relationships are attachments to parents, close relationships with teachers and caregivers, and finally, friendships with other children.